Chat GPT,
Yeah.
it's been circulating online. It's pretty infamous that you'd ask it one question about Trump and it wouldn't give you the answer. You ask it about Biden,
Hmm.
it would. That's my concern. And boom, we are live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals podcast, episode number 32. I'm your host, Stefano, and we're back again with a very interesting conversation today. My guest today actually was on the podcast about 10 months ago. I think it was episode 24. We covered a lot of good things, got a lot of hot topics. Censorship, politics, of course, current events, alleged conspiracies that were going on around that time, one of them being the Balenciaga, which what happened to that, by the way, maybe we'll get into that today a little bit. He is the creator of the Instagram account Exit the Matrix 2020, very popular Instagram account that is actually just about to hit 100,000 followers on Instagram. So big salute to that. So today, for the second time, we are going to exit the Matrix.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Welcome, brother.
Thank
Welcome
you.
back to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me again, man.
Yes, of course, man. Listen, I love these conversations, bro. We talked a little bit off pod about all the interesting things that have kind of happened that we think might happen. Just so much is going on. But firstly, let's touch on Balenciaga because I actually want to know what the hell happened during that time, bro. Like,
So we'll pick up kind of from what happened.
yeah.
So basically, Balenciaga, obviously, for those that don't know, very big fashion brand,
Mhm.
has a lot of big affiliates working with them. For example, like Kim Kardashian, huge celebs, right? And I think around that time they did a photo shoot with little children, and basically what was being found in those shots were a lot of stuff that traced back to pedophilia.
Mm.
Kind of goes back into the whole dark satanic Hollywood
Which we'll
scene.
get more into. Yeah.
Exactly. So in those snippets, there were shots where you had little children kind of dressed up very inappropriately or were surrounded by items that kind of made it look like they were in a scenario where they probably had been abused or whatnot. So you had little bond like dolls with bruised up eyes. You had candle lights. You had hooded. A lot of like almost ritualistic type setup.
Mhm.
And then when people started really digging into it, they found the books that were on display for these shoots. A lot of them had very pedophile oriented authors. So diagrams of little children,
I remember.
and all this stuff. So if anybody wants to check it, you could. I think it was like December last year we did the last podcast.
Yeah.
You guys are more than welcome to check that out.
Yeah.
All of it was broken down, and we did quite a bit of a segment
Yeah,
on
we did.
each part of it as it went by.
And we got into it, yeah. But
And
my interest on that is what the hell happened to it? How
so-
come, like, all of a sudden it just everyone stopped talking about it? Because everybody knew about it at one
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden everyone started talking.
Exactly. And once again, it's like a PR stunt too, right? You got to go silent for a little bit. So what they did was they had turned off their comments. They minimized their feed for a bit. They had artists and celebs wearing it a lot less, right? And then it kind of just simmered down for a bit. And then, other world issues kind of start happening, and then all of a sudden people start forgetting about it, right? But not to say that a lot of people have forgotten about it. I feel like a lot of people are still on board with it, or have seen the true colors of a lot of the celebs and I guess fashion icons in the industry, because there was a lot of dark stuff connected with it, especially with some of the other photo shoots and stuff being shot by a lot of the people in those shots. So it's kind of in those. It's like it's the next thing, right? It's that's the thing I think with when we're living in this system. There's always going to be something else kind of taking everybody's attention. So
Exactly.
it's just a matter of how much we kind of remember.
Yeah, which it kind of relates
Yeah.
to like I had to touch on that quick because I genuinely was curious for
Yeah.
myself. Like, how does something
Yeah.
crazy like that happen? Then everyone forgets about it. So I wanted to get your opinion on it. So
Exactly.
thank you for that. But it kind of relates back to like your posting, what you post. It's
Yeah.
similarities to that. Almost hitting 100,000 followers now. How has that journey been? How's the reception been from like your followers, the trends, what you've kind of seen over the years managing this account?
For sure. And I think like for me, I think I started it around, I would say April or May of 2020.
Mhm.
So if I had to compare what people's perspective or opinions were on things back then comparison to now, I think it's a big shift, no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
I feel like earlier on you had a lot more people going against anything that was being said, whether it was about politicians, the whole pandemic, Satanism in Hollywood and all this stuff. And I think around that time people were very like, no, this is, a conspiracy and stuff, right? But I think it's like the beauty in all of it, because it's kind of like this is how much darkness needed to be shown over 2 to 3 years about government corruption, agendas being pushed in terms of, like vaccines and stuff and all this stuff. And people started picking up after obviously things got a little bit bad, right? So
Mm.
whether it was side effects, whether it was, how we have mass immigration happening, cost of living is going up, everything just seems like it's against the people.
Hmm.
And I think when people started coming into realization of that, that's where the the shift in the mindset kind of happened,
Right.
right? And we're seeing that now where people are trying to reinvent themselves based off of what's being presented in this matrix that we're in, right?
Yeah.
And people are trying to, and I think that's ultimately it. It's like to escape the matrix. It's not really exiting the matrix is a lot more than just knowing what's going on in this conspiracy world,
Yeah.
and it's not even a conspiracy. It's just a matter of how you navigate once you know what's going on,
Mm.
right? And I think a lot of it has to do with how we work on ourselves, operating more in our heart space, I would say, right? And tapping into the things that make us a better person.
Hmm.
And I think that's how you would have to radiate,
Right.
right? And I think a lot of times people get too stuck in just the conspiracy stuff and they don't move past it, right? And I've been a victim of that, especially for my first 2 years, right? But I think with time, you kind of
How do you
just
think you
change.
separate what's conspiracy, what's not? Because I
I
think
think
some people would cast that stone and say,
yeah,
"Oh, this is
exactly.
conspiracy." You know?
And I think it's just picking up on history, picking up on patterns, picking on statistics, and obviously what they're telling you to focus on. Because a lot of times when they're telling you to focus on one specific thing, you always have to remember, right? This is mainstream outlets. They're funded by same major companies, right, to push a specific narrative. So when something is getting pushed, I'm always skeptical in what is being pushed. But it's not that, everything is a lie. No, there's some truth to a lot of these things, but then it's being how you dissect it. And you have to be able to dissect better the more you learn, right?
Hmm.
So for me, if I seen the pandemic happen and I seen mainstream media push one rhetoric when we knew what the facts were, we knew what the side effects were, right? That's going to change my perspective moving forward
Of course,
and
and I
how
think
I
that
think
happened to a lot of
a
people.
lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're in a situation right now where a lot of people, especially millennials right now, you're seeing them even when it comes to something as simple as taxes or unaffordability or in Toronto, for example, people are realizing that the system is just against them no matter how much they're working. They're getting taxed, they're not being able to afford homes, they're not doing this. And
Especially
then
in Canada, right?
exactly. And I think that's where it kind of comes down to when you understand these agendas by United Nations, which is UN Agenda 2030 or World Economic Forum's The Great Reset, right? There's a whole strategic design to attempt to remove people from ownership.
Hmm.
That's why we're seeing so much with subscriptions nowadays. Like even cars have subscriptions for like heated seats, you know what I mean, coming up. And it's like you are implementing this mindset to people that, to provide you something, you have to pay monthly,
Mm.
but you won't own it. You're
Right.
just paying it as a
Yeah,
rental,
you're
right?
dependent.
And people are getting more and more used to paying subscriptions for everything.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you touched on a lot of good things here. Just to highlight
Yeah.
you as an individual doing that work on yourself and questioning things.
Yeah.
That's actually how you learn, and that's how you actually stimulate a conversation that's going to provide you with growth and push back on some certain things
Exactly.
instead of just being like oblivious and just carrying forward. But two-part question. One is, since our last conversation, it's been about 10 months.
Yeah.
I want to get your opinion on the state of society, how kind of things have changed, and then even deeper, which I'll let you just kind of rant in, 2020 till now, have people woken up to your point
Yeah.
there? Like people started to question things and stuff. Have they woken up? And like how does that look? How did that trajectory look from 2020 till now? Have we woken up or are we more brainwashed than ever?
I think a big part of what had happened over these past 2 3 years, I think a lot of people went into a phase of depression with what was going on, and I think that was the time where a lot of people had to tap into what was in front of them, and it kind of got to a point where you couldn't avoid what's going on, what you see, what makes sense or what doesn't make sense, and I feel like a lot of people don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations because it attacks everything that they believed in. But there's a lot of people who are open to having these conversations. And
Mm.
even in my personal life, if I had people who were completely unfollowing me, talking shit about me, doing all this stuff, I would say in 2020, 2021, those same people have come back to me now in the last 6 months or even 8 months and have told me, thank you for doing what you did. We didn't buy in like at the time, but now we understand what's going on. And even in something as simple as that, doesn't necessarily mean that they're making all the steps to change their way of how they look at life, but they have at least shifted one perspective of
I mean, that was that more towards like what was happening as a result of the pandemic, like the mandates and stuff like that? Were
I
they disagreeing?
I would say it's more so related to just realizing how the system is all interconnected and it's used together to keep people at a fear state, keep people in debt, keep people in a system that's meant to corrupt you.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Whether that be Hollywood, whether that be the music industry, whether that be our pharmaceutical companies, wars that are happening, everything is structured to a bigger agenda that aligns with UN Agenda 2030 or
And would
the
you
Great
classify
Reset.
that as the system, like the
I
establishment?
think it's the cover for for something that holds all this together. Whatever happens behind that, obviously, I don't know everything, but I definitely do know that is the main thing used to leverage in a lot of these things, right? Which is United Nations Sustainable Goals and all the stuff that they're pushing and making it seem like okay, it's for your safety or it's the betterment of society. It's the way that they present and sell it, right? They have to show you a problem. It's a pre-designed, predicted solution or reaction, and then the solution is always ready.
And who are these
Yeah.
people? Are they politicians? Are they
Um,
corporate interest individuals? Who
I
are
feel
they?
like that part of the conversation it could be very tricky, right? Because I feel like politicians are just faces.
Okay.
I feel like they need to be presenting a certain level of information to drive an agenda, and at the same time, if everything seems too one-sided, the illusion of what we're presented kind of goes away, right? Because then everything looks like it's one-sided. So you need to have two parties kind of always going at each other. Um, but I think that the people in the back, they ultimately, whoever they are, right, and higher up you go, I think they genuinely want to keep us at a low frequency. They want to keep people in a fear state. And it's not to say they want to kill everybody. No, I think has to do a lot with consuming and slowly killing, right? And I think this system would never work if everybody was to die in their 5, 10 years, right? You need people to look forward to something. So
And,
that could be your job, your pension, whatever it is, right? But
mm,
when you look that far ahead, you're willing to sacrifice all these things in this matrix to achieve that. And I think the bigger the lens of a person is, the more they are able to navigate out of it. But I think if you don't tap into your power and you consider everything that the establishments are saying is right, then you're going to stick with everything they're presenting to you,
mhm,
right? So it's just a matter of how you navigate with what is presented to you and how much you actually know yourself, right?
mhm.
Because if you know yourself, a lot of the stuff that's being pushed at you, you're probably not going to go
That's
for it.
why it really does start with you as an
Yeah,
individual doing
yeah.
that self development work, which maybe we'll get into more later. But is the ultimate motivation control?
Control, suppression, and keeping people at a fear state.
Okay.
Divided because that's how you sell, that's how you make money, that's how you the more people are depressed, right, the more they'll consume as well,
Hmm.
whatever that is, right? And
Okay.
it could be rushes of dopamine, it could be food, junk food, like it could be anything, but it's a lot of the stuff that's aligned with bringing your frequency down has some sort of toxicity in it.
Right. From our
Yeah,
last conversation until now, just to kind of circle back a bit and pluck at that question a bit more. From our last conversation until now, has things improved or gotten worse?
I think it's gotten much better
Better?
in a
Okay.
lot of ways, in terms of people's perspectives.
Okay. Oh,
I
fair enough.
Yes, I wouldn't say necessarily in terms of society itself, but I think society itself is we always have to remember too, right? We're in a time where internet is not that old, right? So because internet is not that old, we're finally in a time period where stuff is getting shared in real time. So whether that is our own consciousness awareness, whether that's politics, whether that's other stuff, people are grasping information much faster. And I think it's shifting the way they move, but at the same time, the system is making sure that there's chaos at all times. There's people feeling depressed. And right now we are in a phase where a lot of people are at a very low frequency. But I feel like it's kind of needs to happen to cut for people to push out into the right lane for themselves.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think a lot of us could speak for ourselves. Where the pandemic needed to happen for a lot of entrepreneurs and people to tap into their own reality and what
Right.
they do best.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And touching on that too, like the pandemic in itself, biggest transformation of wealth in history.
Yeah.
A very interesting time in the sense of politicians presented overreach policies that I don't remember ever seeing. Your freedom was taken from you. Um, the division through politics was very prominent. All these things kind of happened
Yeah.
through the pandemic. And now my kind of question is which I've seen some conversations circulate online, etc. How real do you think the option of a possible second pandemic could be?
I don't think it's out of their cards. I don't think so. I feel like second pandemic, they definitely, even if they wanted to try, they were pushing some headlines out. And a lot of times that's like a heat check. They check right before like August, and we've been seeing patterns every year. As soon as August hits, COVID numbers are going up, flu numbers are going up, right? And then when you push articles like that, you see the reaction. So if people are not biting, you can't really do much, right? And this time, what I noticed was a lot of people were not biting.
Hmm.
So what do? You bring in other things, right? And there's a lot of things that they have lined up that they could bring. And ultimately, main thing is fear, presented a problem, predicted reaction, and then a pre-planned solution. At the end of the day, the main thing is to bring in more surveillance and control, right? And
Yeah.
how you do that,
Yeah.
it can vary, right? It could be a cyber attack, it could be a climate change, issue, it could be something like a terrorist attack, but everything, if you notice, they're always an external threat. It's always an external boogeyman or something that's out of you and mine control. You present it, you control the narrative, and then we react. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, this is the solution because we got to help you,
Mm.
right?
I'm interested to
Yeah.
ask. I didn't think of this till now, but how much is AI an issue in connection to that?
AI, in terms of like, are you talking about as in,
Like the way it can manipulate and control, let's say, narratives or your technology or what you consume or
yeah,
how we just orient the workplace, the whole structure in itself.
yeah, like AI is one of those things like it's always progressed over decades, right? And where it was once, and it still is, and it can be used as a tool. And people got to realize a lot of stuff. As long as you program something to do something as a prompt, right? It's still doing it on its own in a sense. But I think we're kind of in a phase right now where AI has advanced. Yes, you've lost a lot of jobs and stuff, but there's also been a lot of advancements because of it. I'm not vouching for it, but I think it's kind of one of those things that by design, they obviously want to get to a point where they could use the AI legally, right, to do a lot of these things. So obviously, after 9/11, the surveillance on the citizens of the United States and Canada, like everything had gone up.
Mhm.
And that was like by design as well, right? Because then you could actually spy on your own citizens. And at that time, it was kind of one of those things that was presented. And right now, it's kind of like, yes, everybody knows, okay, your mic might be looking at you, your phones might be looking at you. We just go with it. But the day they could actually legally implement rules and laws because of what we're doing in our personal time, that's where the problem happens, right? And that's something we already see in countries like China.
Right.
And obviously, that is the end goal for these psychopaths. But it's how do we get there?
How
Well, they
far are
have to.
we?
Well, I would say we're pretty darn close,
Yeah.
right, to get to that point. I feel like they already would have the technology to do what they need to do, but they need to usher it in with something that is so at such a high magnitude that you have to bring in these protocols, right?
And some people will
So
be volunteering for it, as we've
yeah,
seen
exactly.
previously.
And you have people getting excited about it, like, oh, I don't need to bring my passport. I could just scan my face. In Dubai, they're introducing that, right? Where you don't need a passport anymore. You could just walk right through. So they're already starting this
Shit, I didn't know
digital
that.
stuff. Yeah. So they start obviously California is one. And Dubai, they're also trying that. And obviously smart cities is the goal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
More surveillance, more everything, and making people think that this is the way to live, take people away from nature and stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's a more efficient way of living, etc.
yeah,
And one of the reasons why I kind of bring up AI, because I thought about Chat GPT.
yeah.
It's been circulating online. It's pretty infamous that you'd ask it one question about Trump, and it wouldn't give you the answer. You'd
Mhm.
ask, I think it was like, Dean, do you remember what it was like? Say something like a poem about Trump, and it wouldn't do it. And then Trump, it wouldn't do it. Yeah,
It's like a biased answer based
biased
off of
answer
whoever did
off
it,
of a
right?
it
Yeah,
should be a nonpartisan technology, right? It
exactly.
shouldn't be on any political side. You ask it about Trump, it wouldn't answer. You ask it about Biden,
Mhm.
it would. That's my concern there, right?
Yeah.
That would be my concern there. But shifting away from like AI, have we learned since the pandemic, like as the general masses, like I guess it's kind of somewhat circling and picking at that initial question a bit. Have we learned since the pandemic till now? Have people have it had awakenings in the masses, or have we been brainwashed just more than ever?
I think like I mentioned, I think a lot of people have shifted. A lot of people have understood, I guess, the basics of it. But something like, I'll give you an example, right? Like this recent conflict that just kind of came up, right? Um, we went through a whole year where the LGBTQ agenda was being pushed onto children, and once again, I'm not homophobic. I have a lot of gay friends in my life as well, but it was just the concept of pushing something onto children before they even hit puberty or even talk about these things,
Hmm.
and it's teaching them certain things before they even learn it from their parents, right? And taking control of all that. So I think when that started happening, you started seeing a lot of people uniting, religious groups were uniting. And it was more so everybody was against the establishments. Everybody knew Trudeau and Biden were wrong. Everybody was just on that same level, in my eyes. A lot of people, at least. And then when this conflict kind of happened, they just dropped something that's been going on for a very long time, and instantly anybody who believed that the news was fake, instantly anybody that believed that there's agendas, wars are being funded, this by both sides, et cetera, those everybody forgot everything instantly, because it was now about religion, and religion is a very sensitive topic to people. And I think there's been a very designed way to attempt to have people going at each other through decades after decades based off of what your faith is. And I think when a situation like this happened, everybody tapped into their emotions and then instantly forgot about everything that they had learned over the last 2 3 years.
Hmm.
Right. And in that situation, it's kind of like it's a sensitive topic, yes, but then you got to look at the facts,
Right.
right? You got to look at, okay, why can't you speak out against specific groups without getting canceled?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Why is that the situation? Why is it that uh MSM is showing only one side of the story, and then the rest you have to find out from the people on the ground,
Hmm.
right? So it kind of comes into that where it's just like people always have something that they keep close to home, right? And when that gets ignited, emotions can sometimes overpower logic, and we just saw that in the
Yeah.
last 2
Yeah,
months.
because you bring up a good point there with religion sort of uniting people,
Yeah.
which I want to get in deeper with you. But what we saw, what you're kind of referencing, and I don't know if it was across the world, but specifically
Yeah.
Canada, is parents in particular and these certain groups kind of congregated in opposition to what they said was an indoctrination process in the gender indoctrination process, by the curriculum, by the sexualization of the education system, and they were in opposition of it and they were protesting it. And it was one of the very few times that you see Muslims, Christians, Catholics, Jewish people all collectively coming
Yeah.
together, opposing something in the name of morality, connecting themselves with an aligned common goal, which was to protect their kids. That's what they were coming against. So I asked the question to you: do you think religion can be something that can unite people in that sense? Because you remove religion,
Yeah.
and then Jordan Peterson infamously said it's replaced. What is it replaced with? Right? You remove religion, is it
Yeah.
replaced with ideology? We've seen some
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
haven't we? So what do you think about that?
I think when it comes to religions, right? And I want to tap into this because I feel like people get very lost when these conversations. I feel like there's a lot of people in the world who operate very peacefully when it comes to having different religions, right? I think most of these issues kind of more so come up when the media is getting involved
Hmm.
and tainting one group as something and the other group as something else. But if people really need to do some homework, all let's just say the three major religions, right? Let's just say Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, or Sikhism, even, and Hinduism. Like a lot of these cultures, and from the most part, are not teaching any hate for other religions in society.
Hmm.
Culturally, it may be a thing based off of where you live. Maybe there's specific traumas that specific groups have faced in the past, so it rubs them the wrong way. They pass that on to their child, but we can't generalize billions and billions of people based off of the extremists of each religion,
Hmm.
right? And I
That's
think
fair.
that's where it is like amongst my close friends, we all have different beliefs and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like we have respect for each other's beliefs and we learn from each other's beliefs as well.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's something that should necessarily be an issue unless you're being programmed to think it's an issue. You know what I mean? Like my mother raised me in a very well way, which is to respect all people from all
Were you
backgrounds
raised
and stuff.
religiously?
Yeah, I was raised religiously growing up, and then I took what was good from that and I applied it to my life. I learned from other things and
Right.
spirituality practices, whether it was thousands of years ago or whether it was something that was very recent that I learned. But whatever was presented to me, if it felt like it aligned with my heart,
Mm,
I would adapt and I would
mhm,
take the good from it. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And
mhm.
if there's something that doesn't resonate with me and I feel like this doesn't make sense, I called, with my inner calling on that.
Yeah, you use what is
Yeah,
useful and you kind
exactly,
of
exactly,
discard what it doesn't resonate with you
exactly,
and is in alignment with where you
exactly.
are. But yeah, it was something, it was an issue that came up because we see a lot of, I feel like the culture, Hollywood, and especially Hollywood, you would say
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
very pro. Maybe we can dive into that now,
yeah.
but it's a very anti-religious motif that
Yes,
runs through their
yes,
teachings, their practices, the way they speak, etc. And I'm concerned, speaking from, I'm very in tune with religion. I'm trying to learn more about it, but I agree with you. I use what is useful and what is meaningful to my heart. Um, but I feel like a lot of it is kind of, it's a going against, like they're going against religion. They're trying to remove it, and I wonder why. I wonder, is that something that they're trying to replace it with, because
yes.
it's becoming, it's becoming like ingrained in some certain individuals that like some sort of politics or ideology is to their heart. It resembles them. So how much of a, what's going on there?
So, like, if we were to talk about Hollywood, for example,
Right.
right? And, like right now, man, I think we're kind of in a phase where, obviously, phones or everybody has their phones in their hand, but we're kind of in a phase where demoralization of your typical family unity, your
A
morals,
nuclear
everything,
family.
everything is
Yeah.
getting tackled, right? And the
Mm,
nuclear family is the biggest target.
mm.
And one of the reasons for that is that the more you deconstruct the family with different ideologies, stuff that confuses the child, or puts the person in a lack mindset, you are conditioning that household to kind of separate and deconstruct a bit, right? So just think about it. Think about the mass immigration happening into the West right now. Um, Maybe religious Christians coming, religious Muslims coming. Right now, you have that happening. Cost of living is way too damn high. Both your parents are probably working. Now, who owns the kid? Well, the people teaching this stuff, maybe the phone, maybe society itself, right? So the thing is that they need to deconstruct family values, and they're doing that through Hollywood. They're doing it through music artists. They're doing it through clothing, everything, right? And once to each their own. But when you are culturally changing something at that degree to just make everything the complete opposite of what it used to be. And there's a lot of good things coming out from this modern era. Don't take away from that. But there's a lot of great things that used to exist with our parents,
Mhm.
right? That nowadays you're seeing kids not adapting
Do you
or
think tradition is important, like in that sense?
I think tradition to a certain degree is important, but I feel like if it's something that sacrifices your mental health due to the reasoning of attachment, I think that's where you need to draw your line because I think there's a lot of old traditions and stuff that are important to keep, stuff, but if it's toxic, it's toxic. And I think there needs to be a differentiation, whether it's this new era or before. And I think it's just merging both things together and navigating accordingly.
Yeah, because we
Right.
look at Hollywood
Yeah.
in particular. Let's talk about that
Yeah.
for a second. I think of two people I think of right away, like just that I've seen of most recently, like Doja Cat. No, is it Doja Cat? Who's
Yeah.
the other
Doja
one?
Cat, Ice Spice. I
Eh,
don't know what's going
Yeah,
on these, but like,
Sam Smith.
yeah, Sam
Crazy,
Smith.
crazy, crazy allusions to that.
That Grammy award,
That Grammy
right?
award
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, it's all satanic type of stuff, and
Everything.
I'm gonna remove the conspiracy from it. But just looking at it
Yeah. Yeah.
like that, he's dressed up as a devil. He's doing these provocative dances. Children are watching this. How does that seem like a good idea?
Yeah.
And then that is increased and promoted. But then the other side of it is, which we can talk about. What's that movie recently? It's slipping my mind now. The movie with the it was about the child trafficking.
Oh yes. Wow. Brain fart.
Dean, you know it?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even. I'm having a brain fart right now.
Yeah, I
I'm
watched
having
it
a
in the
brain
movie
fart
theater. It
on it
was
right now.
terrible.
Yeah.
It was so. It was so. See if you can look that up for us, Dean.
Alarming.
Yeah, it
Alarming
was,
at all.
and then something like that is suppressed. The media is
Yeah.
almost talking shit about it, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're almost Sound
There
of
you go.
Freedom. That's
There
the
you
one.
go.
It was they were critiquing it. So my question is, why does Hollywood push this one narrative, and then and then society demonizes and really doesn't push the other
Yeah.
side of it, like something like that, where you think this is a good cause. These people did good
Yeah.
thing. Movie like Sound of Freedom would be something to push. why the satanic thing and why the push
Yeah.
against Christ and religion?
Right. And that's the thing, right? It's like they always got to align that with like gaslighting too, right? So it'll be somebody will, the movie was doing numbers
It
even
was.
without being promoted. And then all of a sudden you started seeing headlines, right wing conspiracy, QAnon theorists, and this. And it's like, man, that's how you get people, right? You just got to use the buzzwords, attach it to something, and then
That's sad though, man.
it's pretty sad.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
is
sad,
sad.
bro. Yeah.
But like but yeah, man, the satanic stuff they gotta keep pushing it to keep people at that low frequency. And like even if we talk about music these days, man, like the music, let's talk hip hop. Like I grew up on hip hop, and over the years, like I've had to just completely stop listening to it for the most part because the frequencies that they're using and the hertz that they're using, it's keeping people like at a very low frequency. And if you notice, a lot of the tracks they don't make you feel elevated. It's like da 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 da,
Mm.
and it's like it's this stagnant energy that you don't feel uplifted,
Would you put
right?
Drake in that?
I think Drake's albums have changed over the years, and I think he does use a lot of hertz around that frequency now, comparison to 5 years ago. Where I felt like back then, I felt like everything was just hitting the heart. You felt it in his music. Now I feel like, once again, nothing according to his craft, but I feel like if you're working that high up, at one point somebody's gonna tell you, okay, man, switch this up, tweak this up. This is your target market as well. You got to cater to these guys, and by that I mean the younger
So
generations.
do you think like
Yeah.
Hollywood and musicians, they all have to subscribe to this certain type of mentality and way to do things?
I think at a certain level, when you cross a certain level, or if you want to cross a certain level, you have to do that, right? And then we've seen that like growing up, man, like 10, 12 years now. I've been listening to The Weeknd and Drake, obviously it's hometown people, but to kind of just even see The Weeknd kind of go into this whole route with ritualistic type acts, promos for his shows and stuff. I mean, there's no arguing what's going on, right? To the extent where he did post something on his story, I believe, within the last year or so, where it was a cartoon from, I guess, like an old film showing like an executive showing him a contract, and it's just telling him you have to sign this contract with blood. And he posted that on his
So
stories,
weird, man.
right? But the thing is, he's acknowledging it, right? So we're at that point now where they're openly acknowledging these things, and you still have people following them. So what does that tell you, right? The disconnection of people when in terms of how much they're doing things with intention right
I
now.
think it just go like
Yeah.
most of this stuff goes over people. Oh, it's just a creative
Yeah,
expression. Like
creative
Sam
expression.
Smith dancing around in devil costume with a bunch of devils around him and with fire everywhere that
Yeah.
is completely looks like hell. That's just an expression of the art.
Oh, it's the expression of art. That's all they say. And then yeah, it's just so much now everywhere, man. Like you see the upside down crosses amongst rappers so often now, tatted on their faces, or just like sitting in like a ritual. Like I think there was one with Playboy Cardi, a video. I think it was Playboy Cardi. He was just on a floor with like a pentagram on the ground, and he's just laying in the middle or some shit. And it's just like,
That's
like once again, like I look at it. I look at it. A lot of these artists I listen to, when they started, I also sensed a change in the frequencies of their music too, right? Because then I'm just like, when I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, damn, like this shit is actually doesn't feel that nice.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like now, that's why like a lot of the songs that I listen to, I've switched over to electronic a lot of times because there's no lyrics, and a lot of the frequencies used in that music, it's meant to uplift
you
you.
do kind of go into
Yeah,
somewhat of a trance.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it takes you into like another realm
Yeah.
of like I
A
noticed
little
that
bit
with
more elevated, right? I feel like hip hop at one point had some substance to it. R&B had some substance to it.
yeah,
Now it's just about like pussy, hoes, and money
yeah.
and this and that. You know what I mean? So that's the byproduct of the people that run these record labels of what they're
Mhm.
trying to push, right?
100%.
Yeah,
And like segueing from like music and stuff and then into media. Now let's talk about media narratives
yeah,
because the mainstream, like we talk about COVID, we were a victim of that. Maybe not us particular, but us as a society and the collective, we were a victim of that narrative. Every
yep,
day you turn on the 6 o'clock news, it'd have the number list, the fear mongering, that this is what you have to do, this is what you have to
yeah.
do. Some people being like, okay, okay. And then other people questioning and being like, what's going on here? How much are we victims to this mainstream narrative? And is there any optimism on way of shifting out of it? Is it social media? What is it? What does that look like for you?
I think right now what we're seeing, like what we're doing right now, podcasts, social media, influencers, uh, people just taking the lead and changing their lives based off of what power they've tapped in internally. I feel like that is the driving force to break out of any of this, right? That is the driving force. Because if we continuously look to politicians, continuously look to, um, mainstream media, the stuff that has never worked, we're constantly going to go down the same pattern. So I think right now it's just more about, I guess you could say, collective consciousness,
Okay.
understanding how, I'm working, how you're working, inspiring each other and kind of moving out of that and just seeing, okay, this is what we can control. These are the things we cannot. Let's be aware of it. Let's understand it. When it's presented to us, how do we move?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think each step, as the collective consciousness keeps on increasing, you're gonna see more resistance to a lot of the stuff that's being pushed.
Hmm.
And I think that's ultimately the best thing people could do, right? Is put your head down, focus on the stuff that matters to you the most. Um, Keeping your family unit strong. I think that's another big thing that people don't understand is that the stronger your family unit is, the more you are able to beat a system, right? If you're a deconstructed family with mental health issues, there's definitely less money involved. There's less, there's more traumas involved. There's a lot of things that contribute to you suppressing yourself.
Hmm.
But I think with a stronger, healthy family unit or a good group of people, friends around you, that is a network that can be used.
Right. And
You
it's
know?
so important
Yeah.
to touch on that. The family unit is so important. Sticking together, because what they want, or whoever you want to call
Yeah.
it, politicians or the people that don't want you to prosper, is the divide and conquer. So it's really important to make sure that we're staying on top of that for the family. But the media, we're real big victims to the media. But the good news is we have these social media outlets.
Yeah.
We have things like Instagram, which we're going to touch on censorship next.
Yeah.
But just to stay on here for 1 second, the positives is you look at like a time through COVID, okay? Travesty that happened.
Yeah.
We're getting pushed one certain narrative, and we're not allowed any opposition to that narrative. Even on social media too, which censorship too, which we'll get into next. But it did have the opportunity. For example, your account started during that
Yeah.
time, right? And a lot of people who resonated with that message, or who wanted to question things in that collective conscious type of way, were able to follow you or contribute to that those positions. So it is a positive. The media is there. They're going to have that narrative, but things like social media, where we have these opportunities to see these things. You bring up podcasting. Joe Rogan was one of the main guys through the pandemic that would have guys on that the mainstream media didn't want to do. They tried to cancel him. They threw him on CNN with the golden face, and he was
Everything.
taking horse tranquilizer,
I remember
horse
that.
medication, all these different things. They try to do what they can, but truth always wins.
Always wins.
It really does always wins. So maybe touch on that a bit. How important is these forms of social media and guys like Joe Rogan, guys like that are going to have these conversations like we're having right now?
For sure. I know. I think it's huge. Even for myself, I think a majority of my growth happened after the pandemic.
Okay.
And I think I think a lot of realizations, a lot of inspiration came from that time because of people like Joe Rogan, because of people like, for example, David Icke, or even Patrick Bet-David is another example. You know what I mean? Another person that, for a lot of the things that he mentions or talks about, I look into it and I was like, wow, this is a driving force. It's nice to have somebody like this right now to move the benchmark for a lot of men. Andrew Tate was another example, controversial as he may be for a lot of reasons. I think there was a big chunk of his message that needed to be absorbed, right? Like, we could say a lot of things. Okay, maybe this is a little too egotistical. Maybe this is too misogynistic. Okay, there's a lot that was right. And I think in today's era, I think a lot of people just are looking for saints. They're looking for somebody who's picture perfect. You can't, everybody needs to be Jesus Christ or
there's
something.
no mistakes that can happen.
You can't be in a system always looking for flaws, right? And if you do that always, looking for flaws is one thing, but I'm saying, you can't always look for flaws in inspiration.
And the best thing is the people telling you that those guys are bad definitely have their shit too.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no perfection.
Everybody has their own shit at the end of the day, right? Somebody may look at even me and say, I'm not the perfect person to be speaking out, right? Be based off of something that hits them in the, but the thing is, at the end of the day, you have to take what makes sense. You have to show discernment for everything that comes your way. You can't just be like, okay, this is it's black and white. It's not.
It's not. It's
the
really
world
not.
is not black and white. It's
Right.
never been black and white.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as people come to the consensus of that and realize, okay, they have the option of always deciding and changing their perspective based off the times. You know what I mean? If somebody was to tell me today, Andrew Tate, he's a rapist, something happened, this happened yesterday, okay. what he said was right those years, and this is wrong. I don't have to be shouting him out anymore.
It's like we said
Simple.
earlier, you take what is useful and you discard what is not.
Exactly,
Right?
exactly.
People have this idea that if you're following somewhere, you support something,
Yeah.
you're listening to something, they need to be completely perfect. Listen, we're all
Yeah.
not completely perfect.
No.
But these figures and these people that stimulate the conversation, I think are useful, and I'm interested in them. That's why I like having conversations like with guys like you. But we look and it's changed so much. It's been something that's just been ongoing, and that's just very difficult to look back now. But these figures are important, but they're oftentimes censored, which I
Yeah.
kind of want to get into next. The censorship. Talk about a little bit of what you've experienced with censorship, and then what are our concerns kind of going forward with censorship,
Yeah.
especially in Canada?
I think the censorship issue is it's very alarming, and I think the bigger issue with censorship is when it's disguised as not being censorship, and I think that's the thing about. I think when you go in a lot of other communist countries or places, right? You know, this is the bad guy. This is the bad guy's policy. The problem here is a lot of people don't know who the bad guy is, and the bad stuff that's happening is being presented as good. So
Mm,
the thing is that there's a huge level of manipulation happening, and a lot of it is happening to people who are very systematically based or systematically influenced, or it's the people that are new to Canada that just want a better life than what they got back home. So they use that to their full discernment to make sure that people somehow fall for it.
mhm.
And I think with censorship, it's kind of I for myself, right, with my personal account, I face censorship quite a bit. My brother as well. Both of us were running our pages actively, and I think I might have gotten shadow banned 4 or 5 times, opened up 3 accounts, and then my personal account, which I changed to Exit the Matrix, came back active after about a year and a half, where I could use it properly for engagement. So when that happened, there'd be times where specific narratives are being pushed, and then you start speaking out on it, and then any word that's tagged with it, your engagement will come down. And people are experiencing even that right now with this whole Israel-Palestine situation. It was the same thing with vaccines.
Mhm.
A lot of the stuff with Balenciaga at that time too started happening as well. And it's anything that's related to getting too close to understanding what's happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's when the stuff starts, right?
Yeah.
And that's why these bills had to be passed in Canada, because it's not something that's immediate right now, but whatever setup they have right now, it's going to affect generations in 5, 10 years,
Exactly.
more so than even right now.
We
Yeah.
talked about it with Jonathan Harvey when he was on the podcast. He broke it down so well, but there's two bills in particular that I can remember. Bill C-11, the Online Streaming Act, and Bill C-18, the Online News Act.
Yeah.
Both bills, to your point,
Yeah.
virtuous on the outside, but actually underneath, it's not actually what it sets out to be.
Yeah.
It's actually censorship. It's actually claiming to push Canadian content, stuff like that, but it's not. That's not
It's
necessarily
not.
what's
It's not.
happening. This conversation, for example,
Yeah.
might be censored under the guise of that,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And it's a very alarming thing, right? When you can't have a discussion on topics. And I think that's where we're kind of it's just gaslighting people into thinking, making the rest of the people think that what you're saying is wrong, and it's manipulating the masses into thinking that, okay, a specific type of dialogue is wrong,
Mm.
right? So, and buzzwords are very big in contributing to that, right? So whether it's we had the trans agenda we were talking about, instantly calling somebody homophobic because you don't want their kids learning something at a
And
certain
nobody wants
age.
to be called that. They're like,
Exactly,
wait, I'm not.
exactly.
I just don't want this.
Exactly. And then there's another thing where it's like, okay, you're anti-vax because you don't want to take a product that's untested. You know what I mean? Or something like nowadays, right, where you're seeing a lot of context with anti-Semitic. And nowadays you're seeing that to shut down the whole other side of the argument, because
Mm.
now people are scared to speak out.
Which we're gonna get into that shortly.
Exactly. Right. So it's a mix of things. And I think the media does a very good job of igniting people's emotions, right?
Yes.
So they can parrot something, or so they can feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's embedding that feeling into people's consciousness, and then they react anytime they hear it.
Yeah. They provide a problem, then
Yeah.
fear. They stimulate it with fear,
Yeah.
and then people
Boom.
come in with the
Yep.
solution. But those bills there, those are liberal bills.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you now about politics a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
So we see one side of the aisle with the liberals, in my personal opinion, especially through the pandemic, really overreached policies, really difficult and very counterproductive ways of doing things, very divisive, claim to be doing things for
Yeah.
a good thing, but underneath, not really. So I want to get your opinion on politics. Is there a good side? Is there a bad side? morality in politics? What's your opinion on politics in general? Is it required? Is it needed?
So I think to hold this whole system that's been around for a while now, I feel like politics is needed for them to sell an illusion, to keep things going, to keep that illusion of help always there. I think it's always needed. I think there's always going to be times where you will notice a politician trying to make things better. But I think when those things happen, there's five things that are going wrong.
Okay.
So the thing is, the balance of what they're trying to accomplish always remains. But when it comes to political parties and stuff, I think when I first started learning up about all this stuff, I think there was a big part of me that was like, okay, all governments are controlled, this, that. Then there was a part of me that was like, okay, no, there's specific politicians that are right, or trying to do something or accomplish something. But then as these elections went by in 20, earlier on in the pandemic, then you had, this whole Biden thing happen, Trudeau, you see Pierre Poilievre get into the race, obviously Trump's whole situation. I had to be very use a lot of discernment to understand whether or not am I supporting the opposition. And in those moments, I had to really see how they moved. I had to see what they were doing. And there's a big part of me that still does not trust either side of the party. And I think a lot of times they're being used to to enunciate what people want to hear. And I think Pierre did a very good job because I was following Pierre for a very long time. And everything he used to say, especially in 2021, it made sense. And as he's running for prime minister now, a lot of things still did make sense. But then there are times where they get put on the spot and they need to answer certain questions and they're not able to. So I think in a time like right now, and this is where I think this topic does get a little bit confusing, and I think people need to do their own research as well, is that when you have politicians pushing one side of the story on specific topics, especially when you have rumors, or not rumors, sorry, when you have people saying, okay, a specific group of people run the world, or if you say, okay, the West is not owned, it's owned by a lot of these elite banking families, right? Then when a situation like today, which I'll touch on right now, is with the Palestine and Israel is happening, which has been going on for a very long time. 75 years of this occupation,
Mhm.
open air prison for quite a bit of decades now. When you have a situation like that happening, rest in peace to all the innocent that passed, by the way, on the October 7th attack. Um, and then you see nearly 15,000 people dying after, and you're seeing live videos on your phone every day of kids, babies being taken out, and no help is being provided by the United Nations. No countries are helping. And not until the third or fourth week did you even hear a peep from any politician. That says a lot because in a situation with Russia or Ukraine, we were talking about Ukraine being the victims. And in that whole process, you saw billions of dollars being wired. Now, when that has happened, what had happened? Inflation had gone up, material was going down. Companies like a lot of people's production for certain things slowed down because of a war, right? Now, if you had that same approach to that situation, but you have something that's been going on for 75 years, but there's not a peep coming from any politician, left or right wing, and then you say that Zionists control the West, that Zionist deep state control the West, right? And when those rhetorics are happening, and then you see there's not a peep coming out of politicians in defense of the innocent lives, that is very alarming,
Mm.
right? That is very alarming because that tells you that on this side of the world, you are not allowed to speak out in favor of one oppressed side, right? And when that happens, and then you're funding billions of dollars to support it, that's also an issue,
Mm.
right? And I think right now, just like before, right? You had Al Qaeda, you had ISIS, you had so many terrorist groups coming out um, from the Middle East, problem presented, predicted reaction, and then the solution has always been bombing, eliminating genocide, or gaining some sort of economic relief or some sort of oil or some sort of product from these countries. But the country, the mainstream media has always showed you the problem and then showing you what they have to do to solve this problem,
Mhm.
right? And it's never been in favor of the innocent lives over there,
Okay.
right? So I think right now that alone, when I seen Pierre kind of go over his rhetoric over this whole situation, and not once did he voice anything for the innocent people dying. And I
Have they
think
not been? They not been
no,
speaking.
it was always self defense for Israel. That was the main focus. It would be any individual that maybe passed away on the Israeli side in Canada, and it would never have been about what's going on in the opposite end. And then if we're talking about humanity, and you're a politician, you can't have such a biased approach in terms of where your humanity is more valuable. And I think when you have about 15,000 people at this point dead,
How are they killing them? Like, because I genuinely
yeah,
don't know much about this, so I'm curious
yeah.
to like
So
how is that happening?
so initially, what's the narrative that was pushed was that there was beheading of babies, there was people getting raped, there was a music festival where Hamas had taken over, and eventually, what found out was there were no photos or videos, from my understanding, but it was enough to ignite the West, and when that happened, the division started. So when that happened, right after that, all politicians, especially politicians from NATO, basically stated, okay, this country has the right to defend himself. Okay, but in that process, what happened was people who did not know about the conflict, everybody thought it started on October 7th. This has been going on for a very long time. People like Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, Muhammad Ali, passed in past years, they've been talking about it back before they even passed. So the thing was, for people that are just waking up to this right now, this is a new conflict. So everything aligns from the date of October 7th, because that was a ceasefire that was eradicated between Gaza and, I guess, Israel at
So
that
there
time.
was a ceasefire up until that
Yeah.
point,
So up until that
and
point,
then so are you saying that like Hamas didn't do those things?
I'm not saying that Hamas didn't do those things. I think Hamas most likely probably even did do those things, and I have no doubt, because the thing is that how did we get to that point though?
Mm.
Right. And
How
I
did
think a lot of times people just get, okay, this is what's in front of me, but critically look at the situation, what's being presented to you, what caused that situation, right? And whether the West funded it, whether Israel funded it, whether Hamas is just angry kids who grew up wanting to kill Israel, we don't know. At the end of the day, if they're freedom fighters, extremists, I am not the person to tell you who they are. But I can definitely tell the audience who's looking right now, if Hamas did not exist, Palestinians will still be living as second class citizens in Israel. That's still their reality, right? So the thing is that they are still considered less than human in Israel, right? And if Hamas does not exist, that is still their circumstances. And I think that's what people need to understand, is just the ideology of humanity in this, is that do they deserve to be living as second class citizens in that land? And that land, there's a lot of controversy over it, who it belongs to, because Jerusalem has been one of those places. It's a holy land. All religions have been fighting over it for decades.
So that's fundamentally the issue. It's not a religious war. It's more about what's
It's
happening
an
in regards to the land.
occupation, and yeah, so it's part of it is a religious war. Part of it is just people trying to live in that piece of land. And right now, what we are seeing is, apparently, hostages have been taken by Hamas, and they're also saying that there's um they're using them as shields and stuff, and all this whole rhetoric
Because they
behind
say
it.
that they're hiding amongst
They're
the
hiding
civilians.
amongst it, right? But then it's kind of like this. It's like, okay, if a school shooter comes and has 100 kids in the school, and there's one school shooter, do you just bomb the school? Right? And that's what's kind of going on right now. If you found like 50, 60 Hamas members since this all started, and 15,000 people died, 7,000 of them being children, um, are you really finding
Because it's like
anybody?
50%. I can,
Nearly 50% of children are
are
babies. Yeah.
yeah. So nearly of the amongst the population is very
Yeah.
filled with a lot of young people.
Exactly.
that
And I
live there.
think I think right now it's just kind of more so about humanity itself, right? It's not about, are you on the Palestinian side or are you on the Israeli side? It's just about humanity itself and finding a solution. But when you have Western countries funding billions for Israel to do this, when you have no politicians that could speak out against them, when you have no celebrities that could speak out against them without being canceled, that is a very dangerous rhetoric, and scene, right? Because that is ultimately telling you that if you are to speak out against a certain topic, you would get canceled. You don't have many topics that could happen in. But when you do have those topics, you need to be starting to question those topics as to why. You can't have the other side of the argument,
Mm.
right? So, me I have the utmost sympathy for innocent people on either side. But when you see one side have no army, one side have no rights, one side have no, and no political part, nothing, and they have sticks and stones literally being thrown at tanks, and that's the side that's getting eradicated because of Hamas. You know
So
what I
they
mean?
share the land, right?
Yeah,
They do, like, right now currently they share the land,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
the issue is one or the other wants to take over all the land.
Well, so the argument here is that Palestinians have lived there, right? So 1947, when the UN intervened, the whole after the Holocaust and everything, the
So
whole
post
purpose
World War
was
II.
yes. So the whole thing was to Jewish people were going to move in Israel. Israel was going to be land for the Jews, and the Balfour Declaration that had been written in 1917, and that was with the British government and a elite banking family, which is the Rothschilds, who control the central banks in the world. They had already dictated that Israel would be created on the land of Palestine on the Balfour Declaration, and that was from 1917. So when the Holocaust happened, this land was prepared and ready. But in that Balfour, it clearly stated that if Jewish people were to move into this land, all the existing Arabs and entities that live on that land should not be harmed. It's great when it looks like that on paper, but when it starts happening, and you see, and at that time there was a thing called the Nakba, where they basically it was just basically eradication of like non-Jews at that time, right? Um, it led to constantly people just dying over the years and land being put aside for the Palestinians. And obviously, the population has gone up and down throughout the years. That's why a lot of the people there right now are children, right? So
Because
they
they're
have been
very young,
trying,
yeah.
yeah, they've been trying to reproduce and make obviously their seeds pass because people just continuously dying. And watching some of these videos, very resilient, right? Like, okay, my wife, my kid just passed away. We're gonna have more kids now because we live here. This is our home, right? And that's the conflict ultimately that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, each side has their own perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
but these ones are the facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a open air prison happening legally, funded by United States, and you have the Nations just watching, that kind of just tells you that if they're not able to interfere in this, but they're interfering with Russia and Ukraine, which one do you want you to see as the victim,
Okay,
right?
and the question, like, a lot of the Arab countries that are surrounding, how much do they support
So
this
I
situation?
think when it comes to the Arab countries, right? I personally, this is my own opinion, right? I personally think that if you go against the Zionist deep state,
What is that? Because I generally don't. What does that mean?
it's so the Zionism is obviously it's extremism and it comes in all forms, right? So, I think when you go trickle up the ladder in that, and you start looking at mainstream media outlets, and you see that a lot of them are owned by Jewish executives. You could go anywhere from CNN to CBS to any of the biggest of biggest, right? When you look at that, when you look at the factors that you can't speak out against a certain group of people, when you look at how Kanye or even Kyrie Irving had to apologize and do a list of things based off of just a retweet, that tells you a lot because they could speak out against Jesus, they could speak out against Muhammad, Buddha, Hinduism, anything. You'll never see these type of repercussions for anybody.
Well, Kanye messed up when he said he loved Hitler. That was the only.
Yeah, that's where he.
Alex Jones.
I know. I don't. And once again, like, just to clarify, right, for anybody just tapping in right
Yeah.
now, in no way or form do I have any hate or animosity towards any group. I think it's just a discernment in finding that, okay, there's levels of extremism and there's levels of people who just want peace and want to be for humanity. And I think in extremism in any religious form or group is not acceptable.
I agree.
And if we say that one form is not acceptable, Holocaust is unacceptable, 9/11 is unacceptable, even though I do consider that an inside job. You can't move forward and then do the same thing. And what we're seeing right now with the killing of these people, when you haven't even found the thing that you're looking for, which is your hostages or Hamas, and you're killing that many people, that's unacceptable. And I think people need to use discernment in each situation, which you're seeing right now.
So, do you think if they were to go in, what would be the alternate? Couple more questions on this. What would be the ultimate approach then if they went in to kill Hamas face to face?
Well, I mean, special forces, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like in that situation.
Why wouldn't they do that, for example? Just somebody
Exactly.
that doesn't know much about it, why wouldn't they do that?
Well, I mean, you got to see.
Because they claim they're hiding under
Yeah,
hospitals
like
and all that.
there's a lot of
What's
things
happening
involved,
there?
right? But it's like I'll give you a prime example, and this is where propaganda and mainstream media comes out again, right? The other day, it was one of the higher ups in the Israeli army, and he went into on CNN, went into I think it was the hospital. He tried to show a secret shaft, which was considered a tunnel, and then he showed apparently a list of things where I think were their plan or their names of all the Hamas members. Somebody screenshotted the image that he was showing for their plan, or I guess the names. And when they screenshotted the names, I mean the grid that they had, it was just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Arabic. None of it was according to what they were saying in terms of Hamas's plan. But then it's once again, mainstream media in the West is changing people's perspectives based off of Zionist deep state to make one group look more like of a victim in this situation.
Yeah, because
And the only victims in this are the innocent people that passed away. It's not the
100%.
government.
And
It's
then
not the
leading
government.
towards like a
Yeah.
possible solution, is a two-state solution an option?
Honestly, everybody's egos would get in the way, right? Obviously, the people who consider it home are gonna say, "Okay, two-state is never possible. We want the other side gone." I feel like right now you're in a situation where one side just wants to be alive and at peace. The other side wants them gone. There's a lot of people on either sides that don't want that as well. They want to live in harmony and peace with the opposition. But I think if we're looking at it from the outside in, the most realistic solution is a two-state solution with peace, right?
Okay.
But I don't ever think United Nations would allow that because it keeps people divided, and it's been like that for 75 years. And it's just like I told you, I'm like right now they just dropped this, and then boom, division at a mass scale again that we haven't experienced in over 10 to 12 months. You know what I mean? And it's started again.
I'm interested to ask, like, since Biden's been in office,
Mhm.
Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Israel came up again. Like you said, it's
Yeah,
been going
yeah.
on for a tremendous amount of time, but as of recently, do you think if Trump was in office, would that make a difference?
There's a part of me that always have acknowledged that okay, when Trump was in office, there were no
There
wars,
was zero wars.
nothing, right? There's a part of me that agrees with a lot of things that Trump say. There's a part of me that doesn't trust him as well. Now, Biden getting into office once again, Biden ain't pulling no strings. We all know this.
We all know
We
that.
all know this.
And
This
I think
guy-
that's one of the reasons why the
Yeah.
establishment didn't like Trump, is because he was probably one of the very few people that they couldn't control.
Exactly. And I think it's also I think it's Biden's face as president is also a representation of the times and what United States has become based off of everything. Everything is just saturated, milked out quality,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's music,
Disingenuous.
everything is just the worst it's ever been. So I think Biden being president of possibly the most powerful nation in the world is just a representation of the times,
Yeah.
right?
Well, we think about it
Yeah.
like you talking about Biden, talking about his son for just 2 seconds here.
Yeah.
We talked about
Wow.
censorship. The Hunter Biden situation is just a tremendous. Like, if that was Trump's son,
Oh, dude.
what would happen? Like the bias and the hypocrisy is just unbelievable.
Oh, they would have gone with it for till forever.
Yeah,
Forever.
like-
They wouldn't have stopped, you know what I mean? And I think obviously Trump, the rhetoric around Trump has always been, you know, he's this, he's that. But I think now, even if you see those street interviews, right? A lot of people are just like, fuck Biden. You know what I mean? Like, what is that? Because
The pendulum is
and
swinging.
I think back to coming, like when you asked me if like people have changed their perspectives,
right.
I think ultimately when you hit people's pockets or you put people in survival mode, that's where our sixth sense and our intuition starts working better because we get automatically put into a situation where we got to take care of our own shit.
Mm.
And I think that's what's happening right now is that when the finances get hit, other parts of your consciousness start working. And we're seeing that
Yeah.
right now. We're seeing that on a grand scale where, you know, times are hard for a
Yeah.
lot of people and it's igniting a separate part of them that makes them either think a different way or do something different.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true. And my concern here, lastly, on just segueing to the final segment here, but my concern is the division through politics. I think a lot of these figures are divisive and they claim to be actually good people, but underneath it, their politics is divisive. The way they speak is divisive. Like, oh, if you're not vaccinated, this,
Yeah.
that, and the other, like that same type of mentality. I think Trump was a big part of that increased the divisiveness, not because of him, but because of the establishment going, wait a minute, we don't like this guy at all. We hate this guy.
Mhm.
We can't control him. He's actually doing some good. So we need him out of there quick. So I think that actually accelerated the divisiveness through the politics. But Where do we go from here?
Honestly, my advice to anybody watching or anybody who's just kind of going through anything right now, I think it's just about tapping into more of what you can control. I think that's number one. There's a lot of things we can't, and I think having awareness is great, but don't let it drive you. I think everybody needs to go back into their inner child and really kind of just see the things that make them happy and water that.
Mm,
I think when you start watering the things that make you truly happy, I think that's where we start to flourish and more outlets start coming out for us to be better, right? In
mhm,
our health, our family unit, our friend circle, what we do with intention, what we're consuming with intention. I think that's the most important thing. And yes, the system is fucked. Yes, it's worked to go against us. Um, but I think everybody needs to really I think once you tap into yourself, that's when magic starts really happening. And that's the best advice anybody could get because you could get stuck with all this. And if you're completely not acknowledging what's inside of you, you're going to get taken away with it.
mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think people need to understand that, like, everybody has something to provide.
100%. I think we're all humans,
Yeah.
just touching on the humanity aspect
Yeah.
of it, right? I think we get drawn into these things that are happening on social media, these things that are happening on the mainstream narrative,
Yeah.
all these things. We forget that at the end of the day, we're kind of in it together.
Yeah.
You know what I
100%, man.
mean?
100%.
We're here for a certain period of time, and I think that's the best way to kind of tie a bow on all this. But it was a perfect last
Yeah.
little thing that you
Oh,
said
dude.
there, bro. But my final segment is salute. I give the opportunity to the guests to give a salute to the viewers. So just a little cheers off to everybody. So if anything you want to say, whatever, a little quick salute.
No, for sure, man. And once again, thank you guys for everybody who's been following me, new followers, anybody who's been following me since 2020, my friends who started following me again, whatever it is, right? Thank you guys for just going on this ride with me. Honestly, that's the number one thing I could say. And just keep your chin up, man. This is like we're all in it together. And I think the main purpose is just making sure that it's always going to be us against them, right? So just we got to keep quitting on going at each other first. I think that's number
100%.
one.
It's well said, man.
Yeah.
And then just to piggyback off that, lastly too, I want to give a big thanks to you, of course, for coming on
Thank
and
you.
sharing these conversations that some people don't
My
want to
pleasure,
have,
man.
some people resent, some people are interested in. I'm interested in conversations,
Yeah.
and I like these conversations, and I like all types of conversations. I think that's the meaning behind
Yeah.
a podcast is being open, depending on where I am at. That's people ask me sometimes, what's the podcast about? I guess it depends on where I'm at, what I want to talk
Yeah.
about, what I'm interested in. It could be politics, it could be lifestyle, it could be entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
it could be whatever. But thank you to you, and thank you
Thank you,
to
man.
thank you to everybody who's been kind of following along, man. And supporting every like, comment, subscription, repost, and just everything in regards to just the supporting of this creative pursuit that I'm on. So big thank you to everybody. Thank you to you,
Thank
and
you so much, man. My
cheers,
pleasure.
everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. And
My
until
pleasure.
next time, salute.
Peace, guys.